Welcome back to the Calaveria podcast. I'm your host, Jose.
And I'm your other host, Samantha.
And that's right, you guys. We are back with another episode of the Calaveria podcast, your one-stop shop for all things supernatural. And if you guys are new here, welcome. This is Calaveria, where we talk about all things supernatural. And I know now we're just getting back, this is our first episode after Halloween. So I hope everybody had, a great Halloween. Now that when this comes out, I want to say it's probably like mid-November already. So some time has passed, but still, I hope everybody had a great Halloween. And now that we're in the holiday season, I hope everybody's looking forward to the holidays, spending time with friends and family, eating good food. I know I am. And I mean, for those of you that are in school, I know like Samantha, right? You guys are going to have finals coming up soon, the end of the semester. So I know you guys are happy about that.
Good luck on your guys' midterms.
Yeah, good luck to everybody. Good luck to everybody out there. Make sure you guys study hard, finish strong. But Samantha, is there anything going on with you?
Not really. Do you have any updates?
No, I mean, I just kind of like working, I am starting my law school applications. So for those of you that don't know, I have been working on that for some time now. And yeah, so I guess I'm staying busy too, trying to get back to school. But if there's nothing else with that, I think I do have to address something, a mistake that I made in the last episode, which is toward the end of the episode when I talked about the TikTok. I know I said, I didn't know which country it was from and that they were speaking Spanish. I don't know where I came up with that because, I've seen the TikTok and most of the times we kind of just have it in our head. We're like, oh, you saw that TikTok I sent you? Yeah, okay, cool. Okay, let's talk about that. And that was the case in that episode, right? So I just completely forgot exactly what it said on there. I just kind of remembered the gist of it, which was the ferry. But the country, it literally explicitly says it written across the TikTok. It says it was in Mexico and it's all written in English. So I don't know where I came up with it being in Spanish and I don't know what country it's from. So yeah, that was my mistake. And if you guys seen the TikTok, I'm sure you guys probably saw that. But Samantha, did you have any mistakes?
Nope, none for me.
All right. So in that case, I guess we have nothing else to talk about as far as corrections. But before we get into today's episode, I do want to just tell you a little something. About like a week or two ago, or probably about a week now, I think, or at the beginning of this month, Lali and I were going to a concert. And so this was the Harry Styles concert, which she had been looking forward to for a very long time. Like we got these tickets earlier in the year. I'm sure if you guys are fans of Harry Styles or, these major artists, you probably know how hard it is to get these sort of tickets. And so this is something that we had planned already. We had this hotel booked in advance, everything. So our day went by, excited for this show. And ultimately, we never even got to see him because he ended up getting sick. And if you guys are fans of him, you guys knew this because he ended up canceling like 3 different shows. Our show being the one that he canceled like the day of while we were in line. Like we were going to be like the pit tickets, like the very front row tickets like that. There was lots of people, like hundreds of people in line already. And then I just vividly remember some girl like screamed out, he canceled. It's on Instagram. Check Instagram. And I was like, what? And everybody was kind of like, people just kind of looked around like, what are you talking about? And then more people started saying it. And then that's when I told Lolly, I was like, check your Instagram. And then, yep. Turns out that he said, oh, I don't feel good, blah, blah, blah. He canceled our show. He canceled the next 3 shows, including ours. So, obviously we were bummed out. I was mad, obviously, because I'm like, we were there for so long and all this stuff. But, that's besides the point. But, the point was that we were there and we were staying in this hotel in LA or in Inglewood. And something happened. So when we were sleeping that night, for some reason, I can never really sleep that well in like hotels or I guess I can, but I'll wake up multiple times throughout the night for whatever reason. Nothing necessarily wakes me up. I just toss and turn a lot in general. And I guess maybe in the hotel, since I'm not used to it and it's not my bed, I'm not that comfortable. Well, while we were sleeping, same routine. I kept tossing and turning and I woke up. And at this point, I wake up. I didn't know what time it was. I checked my phone. It said 2 o'clock, 2:30. And most of the times, if there's people walking down the halls or making noise or talking, loud or whatever, you can hear that stuff, right? So I began to hear footsteps, and I'm thinking like, okay, this is like people walking down the hall. And it's pretty late, obviously, so there's no other noise going on. So that's all I'm hearing. Until I realized And instead of hearing it like, to my right side because I was like sleeping, I guess my side of the bed was facing the door. Instead of hearing it like on my right side like that, my far right from the outside of the door, I noticed that it was like kind of sounded like it was in front of me, and it was moving from right to left, or in other words, from like the door towards like the window. And as I said, this was like 2:30 or 2 o'clock in the morning. When I woke up, I just checked my phone and I was trying to go back to sleep. So I wasn't like looking around. I didn't get up and do anything. So I'm hearing these footsteps, and initially I thought I was outside of the room until I kind of like I said, I heard it coming from right to left, and then I kind of thought like, what is going on? Like, why am I hearing these like footsteps so vividly? And so I look over thinking like, okay, maybe Lolly's walking around. No, she's right there. She's asleep. And so that's when I like immediately like shot up. I open my eyes and I'm like, who's there? Like nobody's there. So I was like, okay, that's kind of weird, like I I expected to see somebody there because in that moment I reacted like, thinking like, okay, somebody is in our hotel room for some reason, but nobody was there. And I guess I just brushed it off and I went back to sleep. Woke up shortly after that. I don't even know how long, whether it was like an hour or a couple of minutes after, but same thing, right? I woke up, checked the time, tried to go back to sleep, just laying down, and I heard those footsteps again. And this time I shot up immediately. I looked over and I seen nothing really, nothing at all. But I kept hearing these footsteps. At that point, I kind of knew, okay, something was going on. Obviously, there's not anybody in here. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to ignore it. And I just kept hearing the footsteps going back and forth, back and forth. And it sounded like it was coming in front of our bed. And I really don't know what was going on. After that, I mean, I just don't remember falling asleep, but I guess I fell asleep. Woke up in the morning and I remember telling Lolly about it, asking her, like, did she hear that at night? And she said no, right? And so that was kind of it. So I don't know what was going on in that hotel room, but I was hearing footsteps in front of our bed inside our hotel room.
My first like thought when you said like you kind of heard it in front of your bedroom, like was your bedroom like I know like for hotels like there's rooms right next to you. Maybe that person was just stomping extra hard or something, and you could just hear it through the walls clearly. I don't know. That's kind of what I thought immediately.
The footsteps didn't sound like anybody was stomping or anything like that, right? It just literally sounded like someone was just walking. Like,
Okay.
I mean, it sounded like normal footsteps. It didn't sound like any banging or anything like that, or anybody like in heels. And like, hotel rooms, they have carpet. So it, I would imagine like I would know what stomping sounded like, but at the same time, I know what it sounds like when somebody's just walking, normally. And especially, like I said, it was so late at night that it couldn't have been like, or I guess our next door like neighbors or whatever, per se, like in the hotel room with the TV on like really loud or anything like that, because I would hear these sort of things. And we didn't have our TV on or anything. All I heard were those footsteps, nothing else.
That's crazy. Like that's weird to just hear these footsteps in front of you and not see anything.
Right. And so another thing that happened, this actually happened before this night, because this happened when, we were sleeping at night, right? When we came back from the venue that we were at, and like we found out that it got canceled, we were trying to figure out what we wanted to do, and we decided, we're gonna go like get some food, eat, and just get something to eat because we were kind of bummed out, right? So we were hungry. We were just there laying down, just contemplating like, what do we, we were trying to search up what's nearby and all this. And I vividly remember Lolly was like laying down, kind of facing the bed, like the headboard, right? And I was kind of facing towards like the TV, like the end of the bed. So she was facing like towards the front of the bed. And the way she was like kind of like sitting or laying down was like her body was kind of covering the entrance to like the hotel room. So that's what I was looking at. And the bathroom happened to be on that side as well. Then there was a mirror that perfectly like showed like its reflection. It perfectly showed the entrance to the restroom, and the light was on in the restroom. And well, while we were talking, I'm asking her, okay, well, what do you want to eat? This and that. I'm, offering suggestions. And so I'm staring, right? And then I see in the reflection, the bathroom light just goes off. And then it turns back on. And I immediately tell her, like, did you see that? Like, did you hear that? And she was kind of like confused as to what I was talking about. And so that's when I told her about the light. And I went over to go check. And the thing is, these lights, they weren't the sort of lights that like, you know how like there's motion detection lights?
Yeah. Oh, that's what I was thinking, like those ones.
I immediately assumed like, okay, is this one of those lights? Except the thing would be, okay, say it was one of those lights, right? Okay, it was on, turned off because nobody was in the restroom. Nobody walked in for some time. But why would it turn back on after it turned off? We were the only ones in the hotel room. We were just laying down. And the thing is, I can tell you that it wasn't one of those lights because we left the lights on like all night basically until I decided to turn it off because I didn't realize that they were on. And so if they were those type of lights, they would have turned off a long time ago, at night when we just had them on, just, sitting there because we forgot about it basically. So I don't know what was going on in that specific hotel room or that hotel where we had those two strange occurrences that just went on and, I mean, seemingly no explanation. Other than that, like I didn't see anything else. I didn't feel anything. It was just those two different little phenomenons.
Okay. That's definitely like a little creepy to experience, but nothing like too scary. It's not like the ghost came after you or anything like that. It was kind of just like some weird just occurrences, like how you said, phenomenons.
Yeah, and that's definitely the way it felt. I wasn't like scared when I was like, oh my God, we got to get out of here or anything like that. It was just more like in the moment, I just kind of didn't understand. Like I was trying to figure out, like play it out in my head. Okay, like it's these sort of lights, or okay, the neighbors are walking, or it's somebody outside. I just really didn't know. Like my mind didn't go immediately to, oh, there was a ghost or a paranormal until I made the connections the next day when I was telling Lolly about it.
Okay.
But for sure, I mean, looking back at it now, it's very, very weird. Well, I think that's a good place to end with this, and I think we should probably introduce our topics for today. We are doing a special episode, one that we haven't done before. We're going to be sharing two unique cases, some that you may have heard of and some that you may have not. And if you guys have, let us know. And if you haven't, let us know what you guys think. But without further ado, let's get into it.
Today I'm going to be talking about the legend of La Pascualita. And if you haven't heard of La Pascualita, I feel like you might have seen the pictures of her. Have you heard of La Pascualita?
Yeah, I know we have both heard of this actually, because this is something that's like some sort of like legend in Chihuahua, right? In Chihuahua, Mexico, which just so happens to be where our mom is from. And like our mom's family, she's actually from Chihuahua, like where this story takes place. And I know this has been something that like we've talked about with our grandparents before. So I'm excited to see if here's something new with the story.
We'll definitely get right into this. Okay. So, La Pascualita is a mannequin that has onlookers both curious and unnerved by her beauty. Found in the bridal shop La Popular in Chihuahua, Mexico, La Pascualita was first displayed on March 25th, 1930. So, she has been displayed for, I want to say, almost 100 years, like 92 years.
Yeah, just about, almost.
And if you've never seen La Pascualita, you may be wondering what is so unsettling about this mannequin. Many people who have seen La Pascualita believe that she is a bit too lifelike compared to other mannequins. And this is likely due to because her face is just so detailed compared to other mannequins that are displayed in like the same marketplace around her. And just like on her hands look too lifelike. And her legs and her hands both have veins like detailed onto them. So she just gives like an unnerving, like uncanny valley kind of thing to people, I guess. Also, just her eyes. People always talk about how glossy her eyes look. They look too real. They look too lifelike. That's kind of just the main thing that people kind of like just see her and they're like, that's kind of weird. Like, she looks weird.
Right, they say she kind of looks lifelike, right? Which is why they think it's so unsettling.
Mm-hmm. But let me go ahead and tell you about the legend and like the history, the lore about La Pascualita. As I said, she was first displayed on March 25th, 1930. And the people in the town were shocked at the sight of her, due to her uncanny resemblance to the shop owner's daughter. Let's go ahead and dive into the lore of La Pascualita. As I said, she was first displayed on March 25th, 1930, and the people in town were shocked at the sight of her. This is because of the uncanny resemblance she had to the shop owner's daughter. But why was this so shocking, you may ask? Well, the daughter had just recently passed away the day of her wedding from a black widow bite she had gotten the night before. And a lot of the people in the town just believed that the shop owner was so overwhelmed with grief of the loss of their daughter that they embalmed their daughter and displayed her in her wedding dress that she was never able to wear for her wedding. And so that's kind of like the story that I've heard.
Yeah, like, okay, that's so, like, I've heard of that too, right? Like, they basically, like, he did that. But it just makes you think, like, why would you do that sort of thing, Like,
that's what I'm saying.
You? Like, I get you may be sad or whatever, but why would you want to just have the body there? Like, that's just kind of weird.
That's the thing, is that I think that's what makes people like so creeped out when they hear that story too, and they kind of just chop it up to like, it kind of adds like even like more creep factor to it, because it just looks so weird that people kind of just believe it, because they're like, yeah, you know what, that does look like a dead corpse. I guess that is what happened.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt that this mannequin looks very lifelike, and I'm sure that there's pictures, right, of like what the shopkeeper's daughter actually looked like when she was alive.
There are some photos of like the resemblance that they have to each other.
Yeah, okay, because I thought so. I know I've seen photos like that. I didn't know I was just making that up, but for sure, when you look at these, which, I mean, we'll have these posted, like, the resemblance is there for sure.
I do want to talk about one other like supposed other version of the story, but I feel like this one, you can tell me what you think about it. So the other version of the story is that La Pascualita was really just a mannequin, but one day a French magician passed by the bridal shop and was just so entranced by La Pascualita's beauty that every night he would come and visit her and turn her into a real person, I guess, and bring her to life. And he would just take her off to go on dates or whatever he wanted to do with her. And then he would return her to the store every morning and just put her back as normal.
Okay, so wait, so if I got this right, basically there was no person that looked like this. It was just a mannequin the entire time.
Mm-hmm.
And this guy just did that? Okay, yeah, I don't think I've ever heard of that before.
Me either.
I know people say that, like, she moves and stuff like that, but I mean, that's the closest I've ever heard to a magician going by and kind of making her move and stuff. I don't know about that. I don't believe that.
Yeah, I saw like two different of my sources, like they both kind of just were like, yeah, this is the other story that people kind of talk about. Like, it's kind of like, it's just like another idea what it could be. I guess it points to the fact that maybe this was just a mannequin all along, you know?
Right, yeah, I know this, like, the story itself, every time, you know, we hear about it or see anything about it, it just seems so, like, personable with, like, our family, because, as I mentioned, like, our mom's family is from there, and our grandparents have told us before, like, they've seen it, like, they've passed by this shop, they've gone to this shop before, like, they've seen La Pascualita, so it just, I don't know, the whole thing about a magician just, I don't know, that just seems like it wants to, like, downplay what, you know, truly may be going on, or what this, like, weird phenomena is actually happening.
Yeah, that's kind of what I agree with. I feel like it's kind of like just downplaying like the story, because this has been displayed for so long. The locals know the story so well. Like, I feel like there's some truth at least to the original main story that people know of, like the daughter and everything like that. I do want to talk about though next is what people like describe when they see her, like what happens basically. Because as you said earlier, like people have said that they've seen her move, they've seen her change positions or something like that. And one big thing that I feel like would creep anyone out is that when people walk by, they say that her eyes will follow you.
Yeah,
as you're walking past her. That's scary.
Yeah, that would freak me out.
That's what people say, like, oh, when you walk by like the bridal shop and she's just in the window, she's just kind of watching you. And I feel like that's just creepy. But I've also like seen some people say, like, I'll talk about that later on when I talk about like the validity of like, is this an actual body, is it not, you know? Mm-hmm. And so that's one thing that people talk about when they go see her. And also I do want to talk about how after the death of the original shop owner, you know, like the supposed parent to La Pascualita, this is like when the true paranormal events started occurring and people started saying like, oh, she's moving, whatever. And so visitors would say that while viewing her, you could see her maybe like just smile a little bit more than like she normally seems to. Like her normal expression is just kind of just like a faint smile maybe, or just like a faint, just like normal look. But if you're looking at her, sometimes she just seems like she's smiling at you, kind of. And that sounds creepy to me. But I think it's nice. She seems happy.
Yeah, I mean, looking at the pictures, just because, like I said, you could search this up. There's plenty of pictures of her. You can kind of see that smile on her. And I know people always get, like, creeped out by the fact that she does look so lifelike. And I feel like that smile is one of those things that just looks so, like, it looks like kind of expression that only a human can do.
And also, like, I feel like a big thing about this is like the uncanny valley effect, I guess. I know people have talked about with that, with like the robots they've been creating, how, or like with like art, like 3D art or whatever. I can't remember what it's called, but the specific art where like people will render like humans, but something will always just seem like slightly off, that we know it's not human, or like I can't remember what the effect is, but I know it's called like the uncanny valley thingy.
Yeah, I kind of know what you're talking about.
So I think that's a big factor for people when they look at La Pascualita. Like, she just looks slightly off. Another thing that visitors would talk about, though, is that if you're viewing her, maybe she doesn't move exactly like when you're watching her or whatever, but say like you kind of turn away, and when you look back, she's going to be in a completely different position that she originally was when you were looking at her. Say she has like her hands up in a way. Next thing you know, that hand is down by her side or something. Like, she just moves positions completely. That's one big thing that people have said happens when they go and visit her, or like they go see her.
Yeah, that's doing too much at that point. I think it's one thing to have eyes following you, but then turning around and the next second she's doing another pose. That's another thing.
It kind of reminds me of like the weeping angels, where when you're not looking at them, they move. Like that's creepy.
Yeah, like sort of things like that. Like, it reminds me of like a video game where like these dummies, there's dummies all over the place, but then once you turn your back to them, they start moving towards you, and when you turn around, they stop in place, and you can tell that they moved. Kind of reminds me of like that, and that's basically what it is. Kind of like exactly what you described.
It's just so creepy. I do want to talk about kind of like the scariest, but also like the saddest thing to me is that people that say when you pass by her at night, like late at night, sometimes you could catch her like crying, like just tears kind of shedding down her face. I also read that you can also catch her sweating at some times in the day. People said at night, or like just specific times in the day. And I thought that was interesting as well. But the crying one, it kind of just pulls at like your heartstrings a little bit, because like that's just sad.
Yeah, I mean, she was a bride, which is, the story, like as the story goes, right, is the reason why her father has her modeling like, these bridal dresses, was because she died before she was married, right? And so I could imagine if your spirit is stuck in that state, which especially in this mannequin modeling these wedding dresses, like having this, I guess, kind of like moment that you never got to have, it would have to be like disheartening, and like you just kind of have that feeling stuck with you forever.
I know we keep saying like him for like the bridal shop owner, like the parent. I do want to talk about how different, there was like no like records of like the death of the daughter or like the bridal shop owner, because like there wasn't a lot of records back then. This was like the 1930s, like not a lot of good public record keeping. And so that's one thing that people kind of like talk about. Like, I've heard that they say like that's the daughter's name, like Pascuala Esparza, and also like that's the bridal shop owner though. So it was like her mom, or I've heard like, oh no, it was like a guy, or like it's just, there's a lot of different variations to this, to like the main story of that this is someone's daughter that passed away the day of her wedding from a spider bite.
Yeah, so I didn't know about the whole spider bite issue. I just always heard that she had died. I didn't know exactly how she died, but I guess that's something new that I'd never heard about.
I also didn't know how she died either, but I feel like I heard like different ways. But one of the big ones I always saw is that it was from a black widow spider bite. I thought that was interesting as well, and that kind of like adds to like the idea of like how her body was probably kept so well, is because like the venom was the way she died. It wasn't like a brutal event or anything like that. So I guess that's kind of one way her body has been kept so well in this story. But these rumors grew bigger and bigger as like as the mannequin continued to stay in like the window, and the locals continued to say like this is the story of her and everything like that. And obviously people started wondering, is this true? Like, is this mannequin really like an embalmed body? Like, what the heck? And obviously, I feel like that would be pretty illegal. So yeah. I saw one article I saw talked about how the police like investigated it. None of the other articles I read talked about it, but one of them did. I believe it was specifically La Pascualita from AstonishingLegends.com said that the police came in and actually investigated and just said that it was wax and plastic. But that was the only thing I could find that said that like the police actually did an investigation. So I'm not too sure if that's true or not.
That's interesting though, like to think about it. Like if that is true, it kind of goes to show just how like powerful this legend is, or like this story is, especially in that community that like it's clearly something that's been passed down to like, you know, person to person, and they believe it. Just like to go as far as like involve the law enforcement, and they believed it as well, that they, you know what, maybe we should go see if this is an actual person inside here.
Yeah. And I really do like, I feel like I probably, if I could have, I would have liked to have research to see if like there was an actual police report. I don't know how to do that. Personally, I do not know how to look into that stuff.
Yeah, no, and I would just imagine just because it's Mexico, it's not the same as like here where we could kind of like request that sort of thing, but yeah, it'd be very hard.
But yeah, even with like the supposed evidence of like the police report saying like it's just a wax model, I guess, many still believe that there is something off-putting about La Pascualita. And it's because of her hands. If you were to look at a picture of her hands and also her legs, she has very realistic hands that a lot of corpse bodies that have been embalmed and have like slightly decayed, not like over time or anything like that, just by like your body being dead. Her nail beds have been pushed, have like shrinked back into her skin basically. And that's what happens like when you pass away, you know, that happens after a while when you die. And it has those details. It has those details of the wrinkly hands, like of the position that it's holding. It just has too many details that people like believe that this is like a body, basically.
Right, like stuff that's associated with human beings.
Yeah. So specifically for her legs, she has varicose veins all over, not all over, but like found throughout, like on her legs, basically. And these were very similar to like other displayed embalmed bodies, like such as like Mao Zedong, Zedong from like the Republic of China back then. Like he had his body publicly displayed and embalmed and everything like that, and they were just very similar, like to how like that looks. And so a lot of people say like this is evidence to like her being embalmed and it being a body and whatever. The thing is that since she has been displayed for 92 years, people have talked about like how has she not like decayed over time, you know, like she has to be put in like the like pristine conditions for her to be kept so well like over time. Is like, because right now she still looks the same basically. She doesn't look like she's decaying or anything like that. So people are kind of just like, I don't think it's a body, I don't think it's an actual body, maybe it's just like a wax sculpture. That's kind of where I stand, or I think it's a wax sculpture. But I'm thinking maybe it's a wax sculpture based on the embalming of like the shop owner's daughter, possibly, since it just has so many details that are similar to like an actual body that has like passed away and everything like that. So that's what I'm thinking. What are your thoughts on this?
Honestly, I don't know, because I've seen lots of things that like kind of like compare, you know, the mannequin with like the photo of like the supposed daughter, and just like the different things, right? Where you said they talk about like the hands. I know one thing they talk about is like how the fingernails, when you look at it, it looks very real. The same with the hair, and that supposedly like it seems to like kind of grow as if it was a person, you know, not like a mannequin where for one it won't look real, especially not look like it's growing. And that seems to be the case. And I think that's so interesting because it makes you think like, what kind of mannequin is like that, especially since it dates back to like the 1930s, right? That's what you had said. It has to be some like advanced technology just in a random little bridal shop in Mexico. I don't know what to think about it. And just with all the different stories and, you know, these different accounts of like La Pascualita, like her eyes following you. Like I know that's kind of common with these sort of dolls, but the thing with like moving around when you look away and all that. I know one thing you didn't mention that I've heard about. I don't know if this is like something that like I just seen once, or this is something that was told to us by like one of our grandparents, or exactly what, I don't know. Maybe you've seen this in your research. Was that supposedly at night she won't be there. She's gone, and that she's supposedly out and about in the, you know, running around in the city, and that she's back there the next morning.
That's one thing I did want to talk about, like after I had finished, because I was about to wrap it up with the fact that like there are other accounts, like people have interviewed some of the workers at the shop, and asked them, like, how do you feel about La Pascualita? Like, how do you feel about dressing her? How do you feel about taking care of her? And some of them have said, like, when I'm near her and when I have to like work with her, my hands will sweat because they are so nervous, and they make the worker feel just unsettled and like anxious just being around her. And I thought that was interesting. And I didn't want to talk to, because I remember I've seen things about her not being in the shop at night, but also like you could still find her like not in the shop, but like around. But I wasn't sure. I couldn't find anything. I was looking for videos on it. I was looking for articles, but I wasn't too sure.
See, like that makes me think even more about that, right? Like, how is it that, it's real easy obviously to look at this and just kind of like write it off as like, oh, it was just a really realistic mannequin, right? But obviously, for one, we haven't seen this thing in person. We don't know. We're not from there. And all we have really is, YouTube videos, pictures, and just stuff about people reporting it, just like how, you're doing right now. But when it comes from like people who are said to like work there, right? Like these individuals that see her on a daily basis, that are, like you said, dressing her on a daily basis, sorry. They feel nervous around her too. Like, I don't know, like they just kind of shows you that it may go back to, what I was saying earlier about the legend just being so ingrained in their like community, or it could just simply be the fact that they kind of know like this is something that is supernatural. Like this is not a normal everyday mannequin. For all we know, it probably isn't a mannequin. Like who knows? Like it could be that it is, but with the spirit of La Pascualita, right? Just something similar as like Annabelle, except it seems to actually have these physical, human attributes.
That's kind of where like my theory kind of lies in, that this is likely just a wax model done by the original shop owner of their like daughter that passed away on their wedding night, and obviously like the spirit of the daughter just possibly transferred over into the mannequin, because like obviously it looks like her. It's had her dress on, and I think it does have a supernatural element, since there are so many like just stories, and because the community is just has like this big story that's just so ingrained with this. Like, I don't know, because the stories, I tried looking at videos of like her eyes moving and they look edited, so I didn't want to talk about them, but like I just tried looking for more evidence. There's not a lot of good videos. There's not a lot of like anything other than just like photos of how she looks, how uncanny she looks, how lifelike she looks. That's really all I could find that was like concrete evidence, I guess.
Right, but I mean, like those photos, like I said, like if you search them up,
we're gonna be posting them.
Yeah, I mean, we'll post that onto our Instagram so you guys can see that as well. But when you guys look at that, you're gonna know exactly what we're talking about, where it looks very human-like. Like this does not look like something that would be on some sort of like styrofoam plastic mannequin. It looks like it belongs to a human being. So I think, regardless of the fact that there isn't really like video footage or that sort of thing, I think like these sort of like pictures and these different accounts, it kind of does it justice, because there really is no explanation as to what it was. Like we know, obviously, if according to the, this like supposed police investigation, that it isn't a real person, which I really don't think it is. Like I doubt that this is like actual body that's just there. I am convinced, like how you said, this is either like some sort of mannequin, whether it's like a wax replica or whatever it is. I do think it's some sort of mannequin like that. Like there's no way this is just a person sitting there. But I mean, at the end of the day, I feel like we really won't know.
But yeah, like even with all this conflicting evidence, many of us, for me myself, like I still believe there is something off about La Pascualita, and there's definitely something supernatural happening there. And that's all I have for you guys today. I'd like to thank my sources before leaving, and they are these following articles. La Pascualita is so lifelike that people have been debating mannequin or mummy for 90 years, written by Gina DeMoro on allthatinteresting.com. And the haunting history of La Pascualita from history101.com. And I did say this one earlier, but I do want to just say it again. La Pascualita from astonishinglegends.com.
All right, I think that's a really interesting case. I'm glad that you covered that. I know I was looking forward to one of us covering that on the episode or on the show, and I'm glad that we got that out of the way. Yeah, so in that case, I guess it's my turn now. And I think I have another interesting case for you guys. This is something that I have never heard about, which honestly, I'd probably be pretty surprised if anybody else has heard of it, because when I was doing my research, there is very, very few. And when I mean very few, I only found like 2 sources for this story. So
That is,
yeah, like, and one of these sources is a very old like newspaper, right? So if you have heard of it, I mean, for sure, let me know. I'd love to know if you have, but if you guys haven't, which I know I haven't, and Samantha, I know you haven't, let's get into this. This is the Vampire Boy of Baltimore, Maryland. On September 15th, 1928, the New Britain Herald, a Connecticut-based newspaper, published a surprisingly shocking story. The story was that of a boy from Baltimore, Maryland, whose actions would lead him to be known as a vampire boy. That boy was 7-year-old Bernard Wallasick. Bernard was not always viewed as a vampire boy, not until he fell ill with diphtheria, which according to the Centers of Disease Control and Prevention, is a serious infection caused by strains of bacteria which can lead to difficulty breathing, heart rhythm problems, and even death. Bernard will ultimately recover from his illness and would be cleared by his doctors. But despite this, Bernard's mother believes something was off with him, but she was unable to pinpoint exactly what. Mrs. Wallasick reported that Bernard, quote, exhibited eccentricities that had grown more and more alarming. Mrs. Wallasick's first sign that something wasn't right occurred shortly after Bernard's recovery, when he was giving money to buy candy from the local store. He was said to have returned home with his pockets full and entered his kitchen, but soon after, an explosion shook the home. Bernard's pockets were not full of candy, but instead full of firecrackers which he set off in the kitchen. Can you believe that?
what the heck?
Right? Like, what kind of kid goes around buying firecrackers instead of candy?
Exactly. Like, that's weird.
Yeah, and so Mrs. Wallasick was quoted with saying, "It's a wonder we weren't all killed." He would go on to do this multiple times. Bernard was also known to lay in the street near trolley tracks in order to see just how close he can get without being hit. He would continue to behave sporadically and often run away from home. And I want to say there was one incident in my research that I found that said supposedly on one of these cases that he did run off, he was said to have come back and had like some sort of like electrical wiring to some sort of like ice machine. So he was just wreaking havoc. And mind you, this was like a 7-year-old child. So it may be like hard to believe, like when you're listening to this, you might think this is like a teenage boy or something. No, this is a little kid, like a 2nd grader. Bernard would go on to commit his most disturbing act at the age of 7 when he ran up behind a 5-year-old boy by the name of Sidney Epple, placing his hands over the young boy's eyes and biting into his forehead just above his right eye.
Like, he bit into his, like, above his eye, or like kind of like into his eye?
Literally bit right above his right eye, so like on his forehead. He just literally bit into this kid's head. Like, he ran up behind him, covered his eyes, right, to kind of do like a guess who type of thing. But I'm assuming he kind of grabbed his head and like pulled it towards his mouth and just bit into his head, right?
What the heck?
Which, I mean, that just sounds brutal.
Yeah.
But don't worry, because Sidney would break free and he would end up running home, but, you know, screaming, obviously, in pain. Once home, he told his parents about the incident, who, upon hearing his son's story, chalked it up to nothing more than child's play.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
what the heck?
right? Like, imagine your kid comes home and he has a freaking, you know, I'm assuming he was bleeding. Like, you know, he has a gash on his forehead.
I've heard, like, child's or, like, just human bites, they're bad. Like, they're, like, they could get infected super, super easily because of how much, like, bacteria we have in our mouth. So, like, that was very dangerous of them to just be like, I guess it's just a bite.
Yeah.
Like, you're fine.
And I would imagine, especially like a child, right? Like, kids are nasty. They put everything in their mouth. And I think, you know, you're 7 years old, or you're no different than maybe like a toddler. And so I get it. Maybe back then, obviously, this is like they said, this was posted in the 1920s, or 1928, when this news story was ran on the paper. So they may not have known, and even if they did, honestly, people are just dumb. They probably wouldn't have done anything about it either way. But this is like, it shocked me when I read that, because I'm like, why would you not believe that? Like, your kid, like, I'm sure you could see the bite marks on his forehead. Like, what makes you think like, they're just playing around? Like, no, I would be pissed if I found out some little kid bit my kid's like freaking forehead.
Exactly. Like that's just so weird. Like the mentality back then was definitely questionable.
Like I said, they chalked it up to child's play, but that was until they heard of the other incidents. Bernard would go on to attack 2 more children in similar fashion. 6-year-old Edward Welch and 3-year-old Melvin Sachs. It was then that the parents in the neighborhood began to make a connection to the similar attacks and stories told by the children. Many children began to tell of their encounters with Bernard and his attempts to bite them on their face, hands, and legs. And it was also said that there was like a string of attacks on young like little girls that would people like ultimately decided to connect that to Bernard as well, because given like the nature of it.
Okay.
The parents had enough and decided to confront Bernard's parents. The Wallaces were unable to explain their son's violent and sporadic behavior. When asked why he attacked the children, Bernard was quoted with saying, "I did it because I liked to see the blood flow."
I'm sorry. This kid. Okay, continue. Sorry.
Right? Like, is this kid okay? Like, what's wrong with him? Like, he's over here, first of all, almost blowing up the kitchen, trying to see how close he can get to the trolleys, and now he's over here biting kids because he liked to see the blood flow. Like, it's pretty clear why they called him the vampire boy.
Something's definitely like wrong. Yeah.
We'll get into what people think was going on with him soon, but let me continue. Soon after, the Family Welfare Society of Baltimore got involved and suggested Bernard be institutionalized. This suggestion would be just that, a suggestion, as his parents were reluctant to follow the Family Welfare Society's advice. And according to the New Britain Herald, after the attacks on the young boys, a renowned child psychiatrist by the name of Dr. Leslie B. Hauman began to study Bernard's behavior and came to the conclusion that he, quote, belongs to the class commonly known as emotionally unstable, end quote. Dr. Allman would go on to further read the Wallace boy and believed if his behavior did not change, he would grow up to be a criminal. Dr. Allman was sure to note that, quote, whippings and punishments would do no good. Instead, he strongly suggested that Bernard be placed in a psychiatric institution to be treated and studied. And first, I want to stop there real quick. I do want to say, like, good on that doctor. You know, being in this time, the 1920s, like the late 1920s, you would think a lot of times people would, give a kid, a good spanking and act right. But this doctor was sure to kind of say, like, you know what, that's not going to do anything. I don't know. I find that so progressive for the time. And it may have been just for the fact that he was, educated and he was a child psychiatrist. He kind of like already knew that these sort of punishments don't do anything to, I guess like unruly children or children with like behavioral problems. So I don't know. I just had to like talk about that for a second because I feel like that is not common at all.
That's definitely something to like note for that time. Definitely back then I feel like they would just be like, oh, you just aren't punishing him enough. Blah,
right.
blah, blah.
That
You're
sort of
too
thing.
Nice.
So, I mean, for sure, good on Dr. Almond on that. Dr. Almond even offered an explanation for Bernard's apparent bloodlust. According to Almond, the desire for blood was actually, in fact, a desire to see others suffer. So, in case that might be confusing to you guys, basically, he didn't really crave that blood. He just loved to see people in pain. And I guess that was his way of, like, seeing people in pain was, he physically saw that blood flow. Bernard's bizarre behavior would baffle and intrigue many, resulting in scientists, doctors, and everyday people to wonder what may have caused the boy to act the way he did. Mrs. Wallasick offered her own potential explanation, stating that certain traumatic incidents may have left a mark on Bernard while she was pregnant with him. And there's 2 notable incidents that she's talking about. So she went on to say, that, as quoted as like in this paper that I'm referencing, that when she was pregnant with Bernard, she was attacked by a wild dog or like a stray dog. And she thought that maybe that incident kind of like stayed with like Bernard because of the fact that it was traumatic for her. She thought that maybe that had somehow like passed down to her child, or in this case, Bernard.
I've heard like it's really bad for like pregnant women to be in like high stress situations because that could heavily impact the baby. I guess it's pretty reasonable to think that that could be like a factor, kind of.
Right, and I'll get into that right now. But the other incident that she was referring to was, again, when she was pregnant with Bernard, she witnessed one of her neighbors get into a very bad accident. And, she was quoted with saying that it was like a horrific accident. So She again thought that her witnessing this left an impression on her fetus, right? In this case, Bernard. But Dr. Amman would be quick to dispel Mrs. Wallace's theories. But as you mentioned, right, research has shown that trauma during pregnancy can impact a developing fetus. And so with this, I wanted to cover what you were talking about, because it is true, pregnant women are not supposed to be, or they don't want pregnant women to be in these like high stress sort of situations, because these things will have an effect on your baby. I took a class in my undergrad. This was a criminal justice class that focused on trauma. And one of these things, it did talk about basically when pregnant women do face some sort of trauma. And in this case, trauma could literally be anything, whether this is like physical trauma, trauma just as like Mrs. Wallace mentioned, like witnessing that car crash. These sort of things do have an impact on your child, whether it could be psychologically, physically, whatever the case may be. She was onto something back in 1928, whereas this, renowned psychiatrist was quick to like dispel her like thoughts or her theories. Nowadays, she would be right, and the psychiatrist would be wrong. I wasn't able to find out whether Bernard was actually sent to a psychiatric institution, but according to Cindy Parmenter and her article on Exemplar.com, Bernard was subject to, quote, months of intensive therapy and would continue to receive outpatient treatment for several years until his mental health team determined that he was aging out of psychosis. Bernard, the vampire boy, Wallasick, would soon become old news as coverage began to dwindle. And I would like to assume that because of this, Bernard eventually received the help that he needed, and he never attacked anybody again. The cause of his vampirism was never really given an explanation aside from the fact that Bernard had mental health issues. It is interesting that his strange and violent behavior occurred shortly after recovering from his fight with diphtheria. No one was ever able to explain why this was the case. And that is the case of the Baltimore vampire boy. So, let me know, what do you think was going on with Bernard? I know we got some sort of explanation, but what do you think about all that?
I think Bernard's mom was definitely onto something with like just how much like trauma it is trauma, like experiencing like a dog attacking you, experiencing like seeing something just brutal happen in front of you, like that is trauma. And she was definitely onto something. I feel like if she can't pinpoint anything else that might have like affected him in this way, that could be like one of just like the leading factors for problems, basically. Like those are his mental problems that for some reason is leading him to be violent and act out more violent than an average person would.
Okay, so I think yes, but at the same time, let me tell you this, right? So I do believe that could, offer some sort of explanation as to maybe some of his like mental illness, but this doesn't explain the fact that he was never known to act out like this or act like this in general until after he recovered from his illness. So again, this illness is diphtheria, and I'm pretty sure I'm probably butchering that. But this is like an illness, like I said, it'll attack like the lungs, it'll cause like heart problems, and it could even kill you. But he ended up recovering, and it was shortly after this where, like I said, Mrs. Wallasick noticed that there was something off with him, but she just couldn't exactly like pinpoint what it was until he began to act out. So how do you explain that? Like, what do you think happened there where he got sick? Seemingly, it looks like his illness kind of caused it.
My first thought is to look at like what other people that have experienced diphtheria. I don't know what the word looks like, so I don't know if you did any research on that, like see what the common symptoms were, anything like that.
Yeah, so let me go back to my my notes here. So diphtheria, right? It is, according to the CDC, it says it's a serious infection caused by strains of bacteria which can lead to difficulty breathing, heart rhythm problems, and even death. So it doesn't seem to like kind of, cause that sort of behavior to alter one's, like mindset in that sort of way. And when I was researching this story, there was no like reported cases of any sort of similar behavior from anybody that was, fighting this illness or that had this illness in general. So I think that's why it baffled like the scientific community and like the medical community, because they didn't know how it was that this boy overcame, this sickness, and then all of a sudden just coincidentally started to act out like that. And which is why at the end I talked about like there was no real like answer as to like or like to explain his vampirism, which we know this is not like a new phenomenon. Vampirism has been along for a very long time. Like this sort of thing inspired the book Dracula, right? This was written about, like I said, like actually inspired by somebody in history that was known to like do this sort of thing. And there have been many different cases throughout history, which I'm sure we're going to cover on here, of people who felt that they were, you know, this sort of like vampire creature. Same here with like Bernard, where he said that he wanted to see the blood flow. And I know the doctor did offer some sort of like explanation for that, you know, bloodlust, saying that it wasn't, or he didn't think that it was specifically him wanting to actually see blood, but more as like wanting to cause someone pain. But that doesn't deny the fact that there are people out there that actually do, you know, want to see that blood, or that there has been people in history that actually didn't want to see that blood.
I do want to talk about how you were saying like the symptoms are like that they. Can you say the symptoms just one more time? Because I was gonna say something.
Yeah. Okay. So this is straight from the CDC. So they say that this is a serious infection caused by strains of bacteria, which can lead to difficulty breathing, heart rhythm problems, and even death.
The first thing I kind of thought of, I don't know if it's particularly true, is that like just maybe like the loss of like oxygen. He wasn't getting enough oxygen. That could be a big factor.
You think that could have been like altering his like brain, basically, like not enough oxygen was getting to his brain?
So he was making just poor choices, like, and for him, I guess that was put to the extreme. I have no idea. It is definitely a very strange. I understand why scientists were just so confused with why Bernard was just behaving this way and, you know, experiencing vampirism for some reason.
Right. And the thing with this whole story is that, you know, like I mentioned earlier, there's only two sources. One of the sources being the newspaper that this was posted on, the other being that article that I mentioned from exemplar.com. But I could confirm like this was like an actual real like case. Like this was real people. There actually was a Dr. Leslie Almond. He was a child psychiatrist from John Hopkins University. I'm sorry. So he was obviously clearly like really renowned in that field. And in the article that I mentioned from exemplar.com by Cindy Parmenter, she does mention that like the same as like I did in here, where there isn't any really records as to show that like Bernard was actually given this sort of treatment, or she really mentions that there's really no record of Bernard after this story has been published. So she kind of speculates that maybe he was his name was like changed as to sort of like, you know, I guess adapt, because as I said in there, we can imagine that because he hasn't attacked anybody else, or there wasn't any like further news on this story, that he sort of recovered from there. And like to further like corroborate this story, she did mention that she found like a sort of like obituary that showed that there actually was a person named Sidney Epple that actually did die. So that's another thing right there that shows like it corroborates the story. So this is not made up. And I have the newspaper clippings, and I will be sure to show you guys who this, you know, child was, as well as like the victims as well. You know, in this case, those small children, those 3 small children that he ended up attacking. So there is proof of this.
Yeah, and like to see that evidence, guys, follow us on our Instagram. That's at calaveriapod.
Right. So I mean, you guys don't want to miss out. Like, for sure, you guys gonna see those pictures of the Pascualita and of this newspaper clipping. But this story just baffled me, and I found this a while ago, and I've been telling you about it for so long, and I've just been waiting to tell the story on the podcast. So I mean, again, I guess just final thoughts on this. What do you think? Was Bernard really a vampire, or did he just need some sort of like psychiatric help?
I don't think he was really a vampire. I just think he needed some kind of help. I don't think it was vampirism specifically. Maybe it was. I don't know. What do you think? That's what, because I just hearing this to me, it just seems like he just needed some help, like some medical help, some psychiatric help, something.
See, I agree with you on that. I don't think that he was truly a vampire, because of the fact that, I mean, obviously eventually it seemed like he kind of cooled down, but it didn't, you know, start off right off the bat, you know, like it was eventually, this was like kind of like the catalyst to kind of send everything that where everyone was like, you know what, this is the last straw. Like, you took it too far. You began to harm people. Whereas before, he was just doing these weird things that made, his parents question his behavior. Whereas he took it to a step further where he was actually harming people. So for those reasons, and because of, I guess given like this like doctor that actually came in and began to study him, I do believe that there was some sort of like mental illness going on with him. And I just don't know what started it. That's the thing that just baffles my mind as what caused him to do this, especially after his sickness. But if you guys have any theories as to what may have been the case with Bernard, let us know. Email us, leave a comment on the Instagram post, whatever the case is, just let us know. And with that, I would just like to end off by thanking my sources. And I would like to say thank you to Exemplar.com for the article, The Disturbing True Tale of Baltimore's Vampire Boy, written by Cindy Parmenter on June 30th, 2022. And thank you to newspaperarchive.com for page 11 of the New Britain Herald, published on September 15th, 1928. And that is newspaper with a Z. So yeah, everybody, that is our episode. I hope you guys enjoyed this, and if you guys did, be sure to share this with your friends. But as always, you guys already know, we aren't going to leave you without giving you guys a TikTok to talk about, right? So Samantha, this week, I sent you a TikTok, and, do you want to explain to everybody what this TikTok showed you?
Yeah, I don't know. Wait, do you want me to read, like, what the thing talks about, too? Because I know the original poster, they posted a long, like, kind of explanation of what was happening.
Yeah, just kind of give us a rundown.
So the main, like, thing that is being shown in the video is this person's daughter's room. It's late at night. You could tell because, like, none of the lights are on. It's, like, the night kind of vision camera. You can see in the left side of the, like, in the video, the door, like, the closet door. Not just, like, the entrance door or anything like that. The closet door just is slowly opening. And it's very, very, very slow. But it opens all the way. And then I'm looking at it right now, and I'm trying to see if, like, the daughter is just, like, asleep, or if, like, maybe they're looking at the door. I can't really tell, but that's scary to see, like, your daughter's room, some random door is just opening it by itself. And then in the caption, she explains that her daughter has been telling them, like, oh, I'm seeing this dead relative, like, in the closet, like, oh yeah, I just keep seeing them. And then randomly your daughter's like, oh no, it's a bad man. It's a bad man in my closet. A bad man is in my closet.
Yeah, and so I think that part is kind of what, like, as soon as I see in the video, I'm always kind of, like, hesitant when I get stuff on my TikTok because I'm always scared something's gonna, like, be like a jump scare. But I read the caption, and just as you explained, like, the daughter was kind of complaining about this, and they caught this on camera. And, like, so as Samantha mentioned, you could see the closet open up, but the thing is that there doesn't seem to be anybody inside, and it looks like one of those closets, like, you can kind of, if I'm looking at this correctly, you can see, like, the back of the closet. It's not a very big closet, to more than anything, it kind of looks like a little pantry.
Yeah, it looks like a storage closet, maybe for, like, the clothes, maybe for the toys, like, the babies, like, just the daughter's stuff, like, everything just seems, like, packed in there. They definitely are using it. It's not just an empty closet.
Right, and so, like I said, you can't really make anything out, so it makes you wonder, like, what is this? And it kind of puts it in perspective to the parents that, like, something is actually going on.
I think it is. I really like that the I'm guessing this is the mom. They say, like, they are a believer in, like, the paranormal and everything like that. And I think that's really good on, like, her part to just be like, okay, something's definitely going on. Like, my daughter keeps complaining about this, and then suddenly we actually see something happen in her room. Like, with this video, like, that is scary. And I hope, they say that they want to get a pastor to come bless their house. I hope that works out for them, because that's creepy, and I hope everything goes well.
I think it's funny because at the end of their caption, they said if they had the money, they'd already moved. And I like that. Their mind is in the right place right there, because this is scary, guys. Like, they say it in their own caption too. You can hear the door open. You could see the doorknob twist. So there's clearly something that is in their daughter's room. Let us know what you guys think. What would you guys do in that situation if that was your daughter, and if this was your house, what would you do? But if there's nothing else, I would like to just thank you all for listening to today's episode. And again, if you guys have a story to tell, please submit it to calaveriapod@gmail.com. And if you guys do want to check out our post on Instagram, like I said, we post exactly what we're talking about in the episodes, and you guys can go back and look at all of our previous posts for the previous episodes that we've done. And that's at calaveriapod. And also follow us on TikTok and Twitter at calaveriapod as well. And I know we've been mentioning this a couple times. Our TikTok has been popping off, let me tell you guys. So shoot us a follow. Send us scary videos. You know, if you guys want us to talk about a certain video, send it to us.
And if you guys want to support us, like, feel free to rate us on Apple Podcasts. Give us a 5-star rating, whatever you think we deserve. I hope we deserve a 5-star.
Yes, please, 5 stars.
Feel free to support us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. I know those two have ratings, and yeah.
If you guys are able to leave a review, leave a review. I know you guys aren't able to on Spotify, but on Apple Podcasts you are. And it just helps us like stick out in the, podcast realm, basically. The more reviews and ratings that we get, the more that it gets recommended. But also share it with your friends and family.
If you have nothing else to add, I think we could just close this out.
That's it. Peace.
Bye.